Hello friends, I've been making bread for my family for a very long time and I thought it was about time that I show you what I do, the methods that I've devised to make it quick and easy. And today I'm going to be making bread with whole wheat. Now if you want the recipe and all the details, hop over to my blog and there'll be a link in the description below. So I'm starting out by weighing my whole grains of wheat. I believe in the US they're called wheat berries, but here in Australia we call it wheat grain. And this has been a real blessing at the moment because of the coronavirus and everything that's happening there. There is no flour to be found anywhere in any shops here. So the fact that I have a grain mill and can mill my own wheat grain has been a huge blessing for us. So what I'm doing first is I'm just weighing out a kilogram of grain, and that is about 5.5 cups of whole grain. I'm going to pop it in my grain mill. I'm also going to be talking about this grain mill on my blog if you want more details. I bought this one about 4 years ago and it's been absolutely fantastic. I really love it, and I waited for 10 years. I wanted a grain mill for 10 whole years before I actually could afford to buy one. So I really appreciate having this. Now I have my setting on fine, which is number 1. So you can see the numbers at the side there. They go from 1 to 9, with 1 being the finest. And of course for making bread I like to have the finest setting. And then you just switch it on at the side there. You can also get hand operated grain mills, but I knew that for me to be able to make bread quickly for my family 2 to 3 times a week, which I do, I would need to have the electric mill. Because it does take a few minutes for, here I'm doing a kilogram, and it does take a little while for all of that wheat to feed through, a few minutes at least. Another thing to know about grain mills is they are super loud. You get used to that, but to start with, it's a little bit confronting. The stones on the inside are grinding together to grind the wheat into flour, and that's what makes the noise. So I'm going in here with some dried yeast, 1.5 teaspoons. I use a little less yeast and I ferment the bread for longer for flavour and for economy. Then I pop in 2.5 teaspoons of salt. I just use regular cooking salt or table salt, not fussy about that at all. And I just grab my wooden spoon and mix those up together, just to mix all of those ingredients through, using the beautiful big ceramic bowl that my husband bought for me years ago in an op shop, which I absolutely love. It's really heavy, so it's great to use for bread. Now in a glass jug, I measure out about 3 tablespoons of sunflower oil. I use sunflower oil. You can use olive oil. You can use canola oil. I like sunflower because it's light and slightly sweet. And the oil is optional. You don't have to put it in, but it really does help to make a moist loaf that doesn't dry out too quickly after you've made it. Into there I put a little bit of hot water straight from the kettle, so it's actually boiling water, and then I fill it up with cold filtered water. And I do 1 litre of water, which is about equivalent to a quart of water, if I'm correct. Sometimes you'll need a little more, sometimes you'll need a little less, depending on your grain, how dry it is, the weather at the time and that sort of thing. So I've made a little well in the center and I'm pouring the whole lot into there. I've experimented with pouring in smaller increments, and I really prefer to get it all in there and just get it going that way. It just means that when you start to mix, as I am now, it's fairly sloppy, and if you mix too vigorously, of course, you're going to have water slopped out of the bowl onto the bench and probably onto yourself as well. So I go gently for a start, just mixing those ingredients together, just so that I don't have those sloppy bits of water. Now, when I don't have the sloppy bits of water anymore, I start to get a little more vigorous with the mixing, and I really use the spoon in a kind of a chopping action, turning it over occasionally with the spoon as well. My aim in this is to not see any flour anymore. So I want the ingredients to come together so well that I don't see any flour or any dry bits at all. And this chopping action really helps to cut through and combine the moisture with the dry ingredients. Occasionally you can see I turn it over because the flour likes to sort of congregate on the bottom of the dough. So you turn it over, that exposes some little dry bits of flour, and you can start chopping them in as well. This doesn't take very long, and it does help you to build a bit of muscle in your arm. I used to use a mixer to do this step with a dough hook, but I really prefer this quick hands-on approach. I don't have to lug the big mixer out, and I get a real feel for how the dough's going. So I decided with this one that I'd put in just a little more water, a little more warm water, because I felt that the dough was a little too stiff. So you can do that as well at this point if you feel your dough is a bit stiff or dry, but if it's already fairly wet, I wouldn't do this extra step. So that's just an example of how things can change according to the weather and according to how dry your flour actually is at the time. So I'm just once again chopping that through, and whole wheat flour is very thirsty. You'll notice that it really takes up the water very quickly. Once I've chopped that through, I just like to get the extra dough off the spoon, and the easy way to do that is with a butter knife. Doesn't tend to stick to that so much. Okay, so I leave the dough for 2 to 5 minutes, and then I come back, and this is my special secret here. This is my no knead kind of secret. You come back, and with your spoon, you fold the dough on itself while turning the bowl, rotating it each time. Fold it over and then push down, from under to over and push down. And I do that a number of times depending on how the dough feels, and then I leave it and I let it sit for another 3 to 5 minutes. I come back and I'm basically going to repeat the exact same steps. So folding and turning the bowl as you go. So really you're folding the dough in on itself, and you'll notice that as you do this, that your dough will become more elastic to begin with before you actually, when you just mix the ingredients together and hadn't done any folding. The dough is kind of shaggy. But when you come to having done this step a few times, you'll notice it becomes very elastic and smooth and nice. So I'm back for the third go. I'd let it rest again for the 3 to 5 minutes. The resting is important as well because it lets the dough do its thing. And then you come back and you push it around a little bit more, and it all comes together in one beautiful elastic bowl. You see that it really wants to stay together now. So I usually repeat that step 3 times, coming back to it, resting, folding, coming back. At the end, when I'm finished the folding, or almost finished the folding, I tip a little bit of the sunflower oil into the bottom of the bowl down the side, and then I fold it in on itself again, and this just sort of coats a little the outside of the dough with the oil, and it means that it's not going to stick to your bowl terribly. Here's a little example. The one on the left is the one that we've just been working with, so you can see it's lovely and elastic. And the one on the right is one that's just been mixed up with water. So that's our flour, yeast and salt mixed with the water and oil. And you can see how shaggy that is and how it doesn't stick together at all. It's coming off in clumps when I pick up the spoon. But the one on the left that's been worked using the technique is beautiful. And the other one, the one on the right, will also be beautiful when I've finished with it doing the technique. So I sprinkle a little flour on that. Cover it with a towel. I use a cotton and linen towel that I have woven expressly for this purpose, but you can just use a clean cotton tea towel or kitchen towel. and we're going to let that sit until it's approximately doubled in size. And now I'm just showing you my hand woven towel just to show it off a little bit. I'm pretty proud of this one. So cotton and linen, which in weaving terms is cotylin, and I embroidered it with le pain afterwards, which means the bread. Okay, so we're going to have a look at what to do next after the dough has sat and risen and doubled in size, around doubled. I pour a little bit of oil onto my hand and I rub that all over my working surface on the bench. By the way, my bench is not dirty, it has bits worn away, so yeah, working in my old kitchen here. So I'm just going to tip that out. You can see that that's gotten much bigger, and as you pull it out, you can see how delightfully elastic and airy it's become. And it still wants to stick together and stay in one ball. So once that's done, I like to fold the bread in on itself on all four sides, and that's just to neaten it up and also to expel a little bit of the air that's risen into it, but not all of the air. You can flour your bench a little more at this point if it's necessary, if your dough starts to stick, or you can put a heap of flour on there, whatever you need to do to make it not stick. I use my sharp bread knife to cut those in half because we are doing 2 loaves. And then I form it into a ball using a sort of pinching technique. Now you'll see that more slowly in a minute. I'm going to give you some slow-mo footage of doing that. But I'm basically going to form it into something that's ready to go in that tin. Pinching near the top, and then I do a little fold over. I need a little more flour there, it's getting sticky. Pinching like a dumpling, fold over, and then I put the folded side down in the tin. Now these tins that I've got, they're cheap and nasty tins from one of your run-of-the-mill kitchen stores, and I put baking paper in them, and I use the baking paper until it's absolutely dead. So if you're looking at my baking paper thinking that looks pretty bad, it's because it's been used for a lot of loaves. I like to economize on baking paper. Now for this one I've got quite a bit of flour down because the dough was getting stickier, and you can see here how I'm doing that pinching, and then I grab it all at the top, fold it in on itself, just a little quick fold, and then I scoop it up, putting the folded side on the bottom, and that all goes in, usually in one quick action into the tin, but today I had a little trouble with my paper, so I just had to readjust the paper to get it in there. If I don't put baking paper in these tins, they stick. I do have some other bread baking tins that are better quality, but they're differently shaped, so I wanted to do these 2 loaves the same. Now make sure that the tops of your loaves are sprinkled with a little flour, and allow them to rest for around 30 minutes, and in this time you'll be preheating your oven. So you see how beautifully they have risen. I take my sharp bread knife and make a couple of cuts. It's up to you how you do the cuts. I usually just do these 2 vertical cuts, very easy, and then pop them in the oven. That prevents the bread from kind of splitting and looking all ugly on you. So that goes in for 35 minutes. You can turn them halfway if you want to. I often do that, sometimes I don't, but that helps prevent any possible burning depending on what your oven's like. After 35 minutes they're beautifully baked, and I turn them out of their tins straight away because they tend to sweat if you let them sit there. And now you're about to see how my baking paper really needs to go in the bin now. I think that piece has done enough loaves, and that one's going to be discarded, so I'll use fresh baking paper next time. Usually when the paper's fresher it comes off more easily too. So we pop them on a baking rack and let them cool. It can be pretty tempting to cut into these while they're still hot or warm, and that's okay if you want to, but you will lose a lot of steam, and then you'll have a drier bread. So I usually let mine cool completely. Now this bread is beautiful on the first day. It's good on the second day, a little dry, and by the third day it's getting a little tired, but it's awesome for toast. One of my favorite breakfasts to eat is a piece of this toast with peanut butter on it. Love it. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and make sure you hop over to my blog to read the recipe and any extra information you might need. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you liked this video, please let me know, because I would be happy to do more like it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again.